Welcome to BBC World News Today. I'm Karin Giannone in London. The United Nations Security Council has adopted a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, followed by a full Israeli withdrawal. The United States abstained. The resolution also calls for the unimpeded provision and distribution of humanitarian assistance throughout Gaza. And it urges member states to intensify their efforts to bring about the conditions to make a lasting ceasefire possible. The US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice said it was imperative to remember how the violence began, laying the blame with Hamas.
There are many tasks to be done to root out the causes of the hostilities, including to deal with the provision of rockets and the smuggling of weapons, to secure the border so that we can lay the basis for the reopening of crossings based on the principles of the 2005 Agreement on Movement and Access, and to provide security for the Israeli people and a better life for the people of Gaza. We must establish an international consensus that Gaza must never again be used as a launching pad for rockets against Israeli cities, because it is important to remember how this crisis began. Violence in Gaza was instigated by Hamas, a terrorist group that called for the destruction of Israel. 18 months ago, Hamas took over the Gaza Strip in a coup, and since then, thousands of guns and rockets and mortars have been smuggled into Gaza.
Meanwhile, the British Foreign Secretary David Miliband said there was more work to be done.
The United Nations has served its purpose of speaking loudly and clearly and authoritatively and unequivocally. But we all have further responsibilities. Responsibilities for the parties on the ground, responsibilities for regional states, some of whom, like Egypt, are working so hard on the practical measures that are now essential, and responsibilities too for the whole international community, because this crisis in the Middle East affects us all, and that's why it belongs in the Security Council.
Let's go live now to our correspondent Laura Trevelyan, who's at the United Nations in New York. She's been watching events throughout. Laura, the resolution is passed, but how significant is that abstention by the US?
Well, it is significant because, of course, the US is Israel's staunchest ally. So I'm sure that Israel will take comfort from the fact that the US abstained from a resolution, the main purpose of which was to call for an immediate ceasefire. Now, even though the US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice went to great pains to say that America supported the goals and the objectives of this resolution, she did say that the US wanted to wait until they saw the outcome of the Egyptian mediation process first. So that just suggests that the US doesn't want to commit itself to supporting this resolution until it sees whether that Egyptian mediation effort is really going anywhere, or whether it's in fact full of holes and will be just used by Hamas to play for time while carrying on smuggling weapons and continuing to target Israel. So I think this will be a disappointment to those Arab foreign ministers who've been here for 3 days negotiating, to those European foreign ministers who negotiated with Condoleezza Rice. And right up until the last minute, diplomats were thinking that this could be a unanimous resolution. So I think Condoleezza Rice's abstention did come as something of a surprise.
Laura Trevelyan there at the UN. Many thanks. Now, the Red Cross has accused Israel of breaking international law in Gaza after 4 children were discovered starving next to the bodies of their dead mothers. And the UN has suspended some of its aid operations there, claiming one of its drivers was killed by an Israeli tank shell. Here's our Middle East editor Jeremy Bowen. From the very beginning, his report contains some extremely distressing images of the aftermath of an attack.
What is happening on the streets around them means that Gazans just do not believe Israel's claim that its enemy is Hamas, not the people. She's saying, "Goodbye to you, my son. They're liars, they're liars. They're not just after Hamas, they're killing everybody." Israel allowed in more food convoys during the 3-hour pause, but the main UN agency in Gaza has suspended its operations after Israeli tank fire killed one of its drivers. Food is coming in, but distributing it is costing lives. All of Gaza is in the grip of a humanitarian crisis. But in the district of Zaytun, it has been particularly hard. These people are recovering in hospital now after an appalling ordeal. Since last Saturday, until they were reached on Wednesday, they were trapped in a house that had been shelled. 4 small children were found near their dead mothers, too weak to stand up on their own. At least 12 corpses were lying on mattresses. We were stuck for 3 days without food or water, she's saying. The children were crying. On the 4th day they were shooting at us. My husband died and another relative died. These were Israeli soldiers in Gaza 24 hours ago. Another group of soldiers was only 80 meters away from the house in Zaytun, where the families were stranded. The key accusation of the Red Cross, which rescued the civilians, is that Israeli troops broke international humanitarian law by failing to help them.
They should have given them treatment. There were 18 wounded. They should have treated them. They should have given them food, and they could have evacuated them.
What if Israeli soldiers did break international humanitarian law? Would they be punished?
First of all, we don't know that for a fact. We have to look into things.
This was Gaza's loneliest walk. Someone with a white flag going past Israeli tanks during the 3-hour pause this afternoon. The deaths of civilians have put more urgency into the push for a ceasefire resolution at the UN in New York.
That was our Middle East editor Jeremy Bowen reporting. Well, as we've heard, rockets have been fired out of Lebanon into northern Israel for the first time in this conflict. It's not yet clear who was responsible. One rocket hit a nursing home for the elderly in the town of Nahariya. Our Middle East correspondent Paul Wood reports from there.
Israelis have been dreading this. Rockets fired over their northern border with Lebanon. An old people's home was hit. The residents at breakfast when a Katyusha came crashing in. This brought back terrible memories of the 2006 war with Hezbollah. This time, it seems, a Palestinian group was responsible, not the Lebanese guerrillas.
They want to see how we react, and if we will not react, it will be today 3 Katyushot and tomorrow 2, and they will paralyze all this area again.
The UN is investigating, but this was an isolated incident. No more rockets fell here today. This isn't yet the opening of a northern front, but it gives Israelis a frightening glimpse of the possibilities. It's one reason for the government to hurry up and accept an international ceasefire, even as it delays to try to achieve its military objectives in Gaza. As that offensive continues, Hezbollah has warned Israel that all possibilities are open. But they don't seem anxious for a fight. Israel, you were disappointed and defeated in Lebanon, he says. You will not be able to eradicate Hamas either. Israel is surrounded by enemies. It believes Hamas in Gaza threatens its very survival. It's joined by Lebanese Hezbollah, an implacable foe. All these groups are supported by Iran. My colleague John Line is there.
Here in Tehran, they see support for the Palestinians as a matter of principle. But supporting Hamas and Hezbollah is also a way Iran can extend its power in the region. And there's little real attempt to deny here that Iran does provide them with arms and money. The big question tonight is whether Iran is trying to widen the conflict beyond Gaza.
The Arab street is boiling with fury about what Israel is doing. This was a protest in Syria. The flames in Gaza could yet light fires around the region. Paul Wood, BBC News, in northern Israel.